probably overstudied again this week. So we're going to have to finish no matter what. I don't think we want to do this for 3 weeks. So let's hurry up and get going. Last week we talked about you're either an I can or I can't person. Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can. The word can, remember, normally it would be the word poieo or something like that. Here it's the word of school. It means more that you're empowered. Many times, practically every other time in the New Testament, it's translated to be strong or strength. It could be power. So I'm powerful, I'm strong. Amen. The Bible says because of Christ you are strong. Because of Christ, you have the ability to do more things than you ever thought you could do before. Amen. Zig Ziglar said people do in life more than they thought they could because other people thought they could. And you as a Christian can do more in life because God thinks you can. Amen. And so we are empowered by God. This is saying that. I am empowered by God. Amen. Because he is strong. And so we can. So you're either an I can or I can't person. And you will go through life then sometimes looking at things, and we've all said, I can't do it. Right. But good news, you can through Christ. Amen. And so we're talking these last couple messages, we've been talking about being mentally prepared. It's like the storm again in Matthew 7. Right. If the storm comes, Jesus said, and you're on the rock, you'll make it through. If you're on the sand, you'll be washed away. Right. But that implies that you're already on the rock. Right. If the storm starts coming, and the storms in life will come. Right. If you try all of a sudden swimming to the rock, or last minute stuff, you start running, you're not going to make it. Right. You're going to struggle more than if you're there. So what I'm saying that for is this. The storms in life will come. Get ready for them now. Amen. When they come, you're strong, you're prepared, you're ready for it, and you're trusting in God. Your strength is secure. David probably never would have overcome Goliath if he hadn't had a relationship with God. Amen. What did he tell Saul? Do you remember? He says, I killed the lion. Right. I killed the bear. If I can kill those, I can kill this guy. With your strength, with your power, God, I can do it. And that's why he says, you, Goliath, you have reproached the armies of the living God. Not of Saul, but of the living God. So we need to make it a God thing. Right. So this is a God thing we're talking about today. And we need to prepare right now. Get prepared for life. Now listen, I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm sure you've noticed it some. But as you become more aware of this principle that I'm about to give you, you'll probably see it a lot more. You can tell where people are going in life by the way they converse with you. You can tell if they're going forward or they're going backwards. You can tell by the way their feet are pointed, kind of, is what I'm saying. If they're talking about the past and they're even glorying in the past, they're still living in the past too much. If they're complaining about what happened to them in the past, you can tell where they're going. Right. If you talk to them about the future and they're griping and complaining about it, you can tell where they're going. Right. But we need to look at the ones who say, you can do this. Amen. We know all things work together for good to those who love God. Amen. Do you love God? Yes. Well, we know God can work it out for good, can't we? Right. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. If God be for us, who can be against us? Possibly. Romans 8:31. So we know these things are true. So we covered it last week, and this is kind of introducing it again. You're either an I can or I can't person. Secondly, let's take a look today at Philippians 4:8. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, just think of good report. Whatever is of a good report. If there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things. So basically, it's telling us to be positive. You have the opposite of positive is negative. You have the opposite of an optimist is a pessimist. Which are you? Which are you? And so we look at this and we look at all these positive things that he's saying, and that's what Paul's saying right before he says, I can do all things, which is in a few verses down. He's telling us to be these things. So are you a cup half full? Are you a cup half empty? You've heard the saying before, probably. And a lot of people look at it and they say, oh, that's half empty. And they start, as they talk about things, the whole point is sometimes it's called self-fulfilled prophecy. We start fulfilling the dismal future in our lives because we've programmed our mind for it. And we've kind of put God on the side. Listen, whether you realize it or not, God is always there for you. He's always there. And if you give up on that, you lose hope. Hope is a great thing. I've realized it more in my life this year than ever before. And sometimes somebody will ask me, why are you doing that? And my answer is because of hope. Because I have hope in Christ. I can keep on believing. And I can hope that this will be good. Zig Ziglar talked about stinking thinking. He also called it garbage dump thinking. And he says some people you can tell just by their attitudes in life where they're going and what they are again. And they think so much and they think so poorly of things that they're not there. Look at this verse, what it tells us to do. We're going to come back to it in a minute. But just think of what happened. The greatest text on this is what happens in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. 12 spies were sent out into the land. 10 came back with a negative report. They first of all said, if you read the account in chapter 13, they said, oh, it's a great land. Man, it's land flowing, like God said, milk and honey. Man, this thing is great. Look at this grapes we brought back from Eshcol. And then they started saying, but the giants are there. They have walled villages. We're just grasshoppers in their sight. It's called the grasshopper complex. We're too small, we're too little. The thing is, you're not looking at yourself. You should be looking at God. You're not looking at the enemy or the opposition or the problem. You should be looking at God. And that's where we lose this sometimes, is we see our problems as too big and we don't see how big God is. God is bigger than any problem you have. He's bigger than any giant. He's bigger than any situation, any event in your life. God can do it. And so we see that 10 spies says we can't, and you know the story as it works out. They poison others. So that's one of the bad things here about being an I can't person, is you end up poisoning other people in your life. And because of them, they cause really the destruction of an entire generation or more because they were negative. And because they couldn't get that principle. I can, God can. There's a story of two salesmen represented by companies here in America that they were sent to a third world country and they were to sell shoes. The first salesman got there and noticed that everybody ran around barefoot. And some of them only liked sandals. And so he wired back to the company, don't waste your time. These people don't even wear shoes. The second salesman got there and he looked and noticed nobody wearing shoes and some just wearing sandals. And he wired back and said, send me thousands of pairs of shoes. These people don't have any. Depends how you look at the problem, huh? Yes. Depends what your attitude is. Right. And have you noticed before when your attitude is down that day, you look at everything bad? I mean, you can just catch yourself griping. Come on, we're human. and you just catch yourself griping about it. But if you have a positive attitude, you can have some pretty bad stuff happen. You can go right through it. And that's the way it is in life. There's the old adage I'm sure you've heard. We've said it before, and you've probably heard it before. I complained that I had no shoes until I saw a man that had no feet. Gives you perspective, doesn't it? And sometimes we forget how blessed we are in America. How blessed we are as a people. How blessed we are as families. Just think what you have. Too many times we think what we don't have, and we start thinking what we don't have, that gets us in trouble. Think of what you do have. Think of all that God has given us. And you should be able to count your blessings in that. Now let's take a look at the verse again. Finally, brethren, whatever is true. What's the opposite of true? False. Okay? So when you start your thinking processes going, are you thinking on things that are true or on things that are false? Then it says, whatever is honorable. Are you thinking on things that are honorable? Or are you thinking of things that are dishonored? In other words, no value to it. You're thinking on things that would be, wouldn't bring honor to your family, would bring dishonor, would shameful things. Which one are you thinking on? We have to control the mind tower that God has given us. And you know a lot of the battle is won right there. And so we need to think on the positive. We need to think on whatever is right. It could be whatever is wrong. You know, do you think on whatever is wrong? Do you start thinking of just some bad things, some wrongful things? Or do you think about the good things? When we think of others sometimes, a lot of times the way you think of other people is how they're going to turn out in your life. And when you think poorly of them, you display that in the way you treat them and the things you say about them, and then they're not encouraged around you. If you're going to build people, people do better under encouragement than under being discouraged. They do better when you praise them than when you complain or condemn them or ridicule them, right? You know, because that's how you feel. And you like people that like you. Jesus said that's just so normal. It's so normal to love. It says anyone can love people that love them. Luke chapter 6. But it takes the character for you to start loving people, praying for people that you struggle with to love. So it says in pure, whatever is pure. So what's the opposite of pure? Of something that's unclean. Of something that's dirty. And so you shouldn't have dirty thoughts. You shouldn't have unclean thoughts. Unholy type thoughts. You shouldn't have them. It should only be those thoughts that are godly. And when we think wrong, you know that leads you down the wrong path. We have all fallen into sin sometime because we thought that way. We led ourselves to it. We contemplated it. Well, that cannot be an open door anymore for our lives. And then it says, whatever is lovely and whatever is good repute, which means to speak well of, good report. So whatever is lovely. We can't think of things that are hateful. We can't think things that bring anger into us or bitterness. But don't we do that sometimes? And so he says, listen, when you are going through events in life that are hard, or that's what the message is on, actually. Whenever we're going through those messages, or those situations, events in life that are hard, we need to be thinking on more positive things, and here's a list of them. And on this one, we can't go through and say, man, I'm struggling with hating, I'm struggling with being bitter, I'm struggling with being unforgiving. All of that is not being loving. So we need then to change our thinking, challenge it. And we need to write some things down maybe and put them on. My mom was one. She always was on a diet. And she'd put it on the refrigerator. And by the way, I was never on a diet when I was on a seafood diet. You see it, you eat it. If it doesn't move, it's game, and if it does move, you can kill it and take it over. So anyway, we need to be positive, and she'd always put that on the refrigerator. See, I'm slim, an affirmation. And but she had cookie and candy stashed all over the house. If you ever asked her, hey, do you have this? Or she thought she ran out of it was here, she'd go find it in another place. So she had plenty of stash, not like you think of today with some of the people. And then a good report. It's to speak well. Do you speak well? Do you give good reports or bad reports? You have to sometimes check yourself, really check yourself. Am I speaking bad? Am I thinking bad about this right now? You know, and it can be, we can get that way when we just get upset about things. We kind of have struggled with some things in our life, so next thing you know it, we start to think poorly of this person, and yet it's okay. Have you ever noticed that? Have you ever done that? I've kind of let a couple little things, we let a little rock in our shoe cause trouble. What do you do when you have a rock in your shoe? Take it out. So take it out. And so I'll think bad, and then all of a sudden I get talking to the person, and they're not so bad after all. You know, they've struggled, and they had a little rock. They had a little pebble. Jesus said they had a little pebble in their eye, but you've come after them with a log sticking out of yours. We all know that, and actually we do it. We might not say it. We might not actually do it to the person, to their face, but we've done it in our minds. So Jesus said then in Matthew 5, he says, be careful what you're thinking and what you're saying. And so that would be, Philippians 4:8 would be the positive things that we should be thinking about. I think I also gave you verse 9, didn't I? The things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. You want peace? You want blessing? Then this is what we do. We make sure we fall in this. Now the last part of this verse actually has a word in it, verse 8. Let's go back to the last part. And in some, just so you know, in some original transcripts, some have it in verse 8, some have this phrase in verse 9. But it's these last things right here. Dwell on these things. It's a word, logizomai. And logizomai is a verb form of logos. Remember logos? It's translated the word. We get our English word logic from it. So the word means, it has the idea of reasoning. Logical, reasoning. And so this is a verb form. He says, take the action of thinking then on these things. Make that an action step. So in order for you to do that, you need to contemplate that right now and here. Because when you face events in your life that you struggle with in that, you're not prepared for them. But if you're mentally prepared today, and you say, okay, I'm going to get on the positive side of this. I'm going to be on the side of prayer and pray. We talked about this several weeks ago. But here, you're preparing yourself to be thinking through. And that's our next point that's just totally on this is think to solve. Now, I've talked to you about logizomai, but did I give you dialogizomai? I did. Dialogizomai. Can you put that up there? Well, he beat me. Look at that. So here's logizomai, which the verse in chapter 4, verse 8 was in. But I'm going to share some verses with you with dialogizomai. Remember when you put this prefix on there, it a lot of times strengthens it, it intensifies it, it makes it a superlative or more of an intensive word. And so that's what this word is. And the word dia means through. So this is what you need to think it all the way through. I heard a man say to me one time, years and years ago, and I began using that a lot. Have you ever thought about if you did what you're going to do, like somebody's thinking, well, the guy was talking about getting a divorce. And have you ever thought through that situation. First of all, it's disobedient to God as Christians. But the next thing is, you realize, have you thought it through what your life is going to be like? Have you thought it through with your finances? Have you thought it through with the Christmases? Have you thought it through the birthdays? Have you thought it through the times that you've had and all the good times? Usually when we're thinking those things, we're thinking of all the bad times. And we let those get to us. And we've got into a problem. But today, you know, the statistics just show people just leave relationships so quickly. And they haven't thought it through. So think it through. Dialogizomai. I can't remember what verse. I had a bunch of them. Why don't you give me the next verse? I think it's Luke. It's either Luke 3:15 or 5. Okay, now while the people were in a state of expectation, and all were wondering in their hearts about John as to whether he was the Christ. Doesn't actually say this word wondering. It's the word dialogizomai. They were struggling with. They were thinking through all this stuff. They saw what John the Baptist had done, and they began to reason through it. They began to wonder. They began to reflect upon it. And they knew, it said the Pharisees, when they thought of John, they knew the people accounted him as a great prophet. So they were very careful of how they dealt with him. And so here's the case is that sometimes you have to think through things and you have to look at people and look at situations. And see, there's going to be times you're going to have one person give a good report and one person give a bad report. Let's take ourselves back to Numbers chapter 13. And let's take a look at it. 12 men go out into the wilderness. 10 spy it out, the new land. Or 12 do. 10 come back with a positive report they start with. And then theirs turns to all the problems. Well, you have two men, Joshua and Caleb, who says God is able. Now, which one are you going to believe? You see, a lot of times we have somebody bring up a bad report. And we believe the bad report over the good report. You know what I'm talking about? And sometimes you need to look at the character of the people to say, what kind of person is this? You know, sometimes you look at somebody and say, this person is a troublemaker. This person's been negative before. This person I don't see them as a spiritual person in my life or in the life of a church or in that. You need to weigh those things out. Because that's the direction you need to go. And sometimes we listen to the bad. I think that's one of the great errors of teenagers. They have kids around them that are bad and kids around them that are good, maybe not as many, and their parents. And who do they end up listening to? They take the bad advice. Right? And you have accounts of that in the Bible where they take bad advice of a bad person and then they gravitate that way. That's the way they go. So we need to think through, and that's part of the thinking process, and we would call it even critical thinking. And that's what happened here. The people esteemed John the Baptist very highly. And then there's another text in chapter 12, verse 17. By the way, Luke, who is an educated man, uses this dialogizomai, I think more than any other gospel and any other book in the New Testament. He uses it over and over, and he uses this of a farmer. And he says, Jesus said a parable. He said in this parable, there's a rich man, and he had planted and had a great harvest. Now, that's good story up to this point, right? Because every one of us would love to plant and have a great harvest. And then he looked at the harvest and said, man, my fields are so loaded with fruit, and it's going to bear so much, I'm going to have to do something. I have no place to put it. So he used the word dialogizomai. He was reasoning through this process. And then it says, so he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tear down my old barns and silos. I'm going to build bigger ones so I can take it all. And then he says, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, man, I'm going to paraphrase this. I am one fat cat now. I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to relax and get some R&R. And he said, you fool, you didn't know that night your soul would be required. Now, as you look at that story, every one of us work, and every one of us would plant in different ways. We work at our job, and all of us would like to have our ship come in. We would like, even, I don't know how many play the lotto, but people have given you a lotto ticket or something like that, and we hope to hit it big one day. And if we did hit it big, we start contemplating what we would do. See, what would you do? You know what's absent in this? It's not the absence of blessing, because God has blessed each one of us. It's what you do with the blessing. And that's what's absent here. He didn't say anything, I'm going to take care of the poor some. I'm going to give to the synagogue some. He could have said, well, I'm going to build new barns, but I'm also going to be able to add that addition that the synagogue needs. Or I'm going to help out. There's nothing about that. That's what's absent here. And so, I'm not, for time's sake, I'm not giving all the verses on this, but there's good examples of this word, and there's bad examples where they thought it through. The Pharisees, it said, they reasoned amongst themselves. And as they reasoned amongst themselves, they said, man, this guy can't be good. He heals on the Sabbath. Now, you didn't think that through very good. There's not too many people that can make a blind man see, right? There's not too many people that can make a paralytic, quadriplegic probably walk, but he did, right? So just think about that. Just think about it. You should have been able to think this through, and you should have been able to approach the situation, whatever Jesus was doing, with a positive attitude. And it was an attitude that, well, God has given us a great deliverance here. But they had already been tainted by the mental process they had even before Jesus did the miracle. Because as soon as he healed that withered hand, as soon as he cast out a demon, he's casting them out by the power of demons. Why? Why did they go there? They had programmed themselves for it, and surely the devil was involved in this, but they did not do, they had not approached the situation and really with critical thinking to be able to look at it positively. So for you to become a critical thinker, do you think of things of facts or fiction? Hearsay or I saw it, I heard it myself. That's a big difference, isn't it? I hear people today in the realm of that we're living in with all the political upheaval and that, all the false claims, and then you see the video or you hear the person actually say it, and it's completely different. So we need to become critical thinkers of, is it emotions, facts, or is it just emotions that's leading me down this? Is it good evidence, or is it just a distorted view? Is it something that's real, or something that I can't even verify? Boy, we need to check that out. That's developing critical thinking in our mind, thinking through the process. There's two stories I remember reading about. Both of them are very similar. Stories about two single moms, single parenting moms. Sad, but some people are living with a husband at home, but they're still a single parent mom. They're still holding and bearing the weight. There's a lot of women who've held on when the dads have been failures. And the story I want to tell on this is two moms, because I've read these stories at different times in my life, and here's a mom whose husband was gone. She's raising the children on her own. And the whole city is just, their area of the city, that is, was just being destroyed by gangs and drugs and problems. And so she got out there and she rallied other parents, and they took care of one block at a time. They finally got police support, and they went from one block to another block, and they cleaned up the whole area because of that one mom. Her son came home one day and he had been shot. And she had finally had enough. And so she said, I'm going to do something about it. And positively she did. But it wasn't a group of men who did it. It wasn't them that jumped in and said it had to be done. No, it was a single parent mom who has all the burdens of raising those children alone, but she did it. Then there's another mom who saw the same problem in another city. Another story years later. And she sees the same stuff happening. And she realizes what's wrong is these people just don't think right. They don't do right. They don't have opportunities. And somehow we need to educate better and we need to prepare them better. So she goes out as a mom. And what does she do? She goes back to college. She earns her AA degree. Then she earns her BA degree. Then she earned her MA degree. And then she earned her doctorate. And she went back and through education and working and starting programs for the kids, turned that city around, turned that area of town around. Both of them did it in different ways, but they were successful. And that's because they thought through it, and in their situation, and with the tools they had, and with their gift set, they went out and they solved the problem. See, you are prepared to do some things you don't even know of. God has given you a gift set. You have talents, and where one might do it through education, the other could do it just from hard work, pulling people together, and getting out there and doing it. The last point this morning, and we've been hurrying through, but the last point this morning is Galatians 6:9. Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. We lose heart. Have you ever been discouraged? Yes. Had some of those days that were so dark you never thought you could get through it? Yes. We've all had those. Sometimes worse than others. But you go through it. This verse tells you, don't grow weary in doing well. Right. Don't give up. And that's this point, is never give up, never surrender. Never give up in that. I've tried to, and a principle I've had, and Ricky's heard me say it many times, is keep them in the game. Keep them in the game. If you quit the game, you lose. If you quit, whatever you quit, you lose on it. If you quit, you can't finish. If you quit, you can't win. So always keep yourself in the game. And you can, because you go back to the first point, we talked about this today and last week. I can do all things. I am empowered. I am strong enough to do all things through him who strengthens me. Amen. You're going to face things, and you might be facing them right now. If you quit, you will never win. Right. You never have a chance of winning. You're not going to have a good fairy come along and let them pull it out for you. Right. And the example you've heard me, I've said it several times, but I love the example from Churchill. And when he came in to his position as prime minister, they were in war with Germany. And he stood, and he never quit. He kept encouraging his people. They kept looking at things. They did things that were just unthinkable, that the way they saved, I think it was several 100,000 men from this one attack. And they just, anybody who had a boat, go pick somebody up. Right. You know, there's that movie that shows that. But point I'm making is after the war was over, they were graduating some students, and they brought him to be the guest speaker. And the guy gets up for 20 minutes and tells all the great things Churchill had done. Churchill stood up, and he said just some simple words. He said, never give up. Right. Never, never, never give up. Amen. Never give up. And he sat down. Right. Never give up. And that's what we need to do. Because when we have a give-up attitude, we can never win. I had a pastor who came to me one time. He was actually not a pastor yet. He came to me and he asked me, he says, I'm going around and asking all the pastors. He was starting a church someplace in San Diego that didn't have any close churches to go to that were good. And so he was starting a church there, and he came to me, and he said he's going around asking all the pastors, give them advice. And says, so what's your advice? And basically I told him, never give up. I knew he'd have hard days. I knew starting a church, it would be so rough that, you get down and discouraged. Your finances aren't there. People who said they would come to church don't come out. Sickness, people moving, everything hits. People getting in fights, not wanting to come to church because that person comes there. I mean, you hear it all. And so that's what I told him. He said, okay. What else? And I said, okay, number 2. When in doubt of number 1, refer back to number 1. Never give up. And so he kind of laughed and chuckled, and he said, okay, what else? Anything else? And I said, never give up. Same thing. That's all he could get out of me. I didn't tell him. Honestly, I remember. Matter of fact, he almost got mad at me probably. But he went out. The first year, his church just grew to 100 people. I mean, it was going great. He was doing great in that. Second year, he quit. He gave up. So that's where he failed. You never make it when you quit. So mentally, you have to get in the game to never give up. Never give up on someone. People don't understand that. They'll take it as a sign of weakness in your life. But never give up. There's always an open door. So I never close a door completely shut. I try to leave it open a little crack. And for some people, believe me, it's very little. But always have a chance. Always have a chance for restoration. The reason we can make it is because we do have hope. That God can do everything. And will. So we keep hoping. Keep praying. For that lost soul, for that person that causes so much trouble in your life, for that person that seems like they could never get right. I pray sometimes, Lord, I don't know what else to pray, but I just pray you'll help this person make it through. Help this family somehow, sometime to come to a revelation and make it through. And I keep hoping. I think of the text in 1 Samuel, I think it's in 15 or 16, where where the children of Israel failed and Samuel's talking, and he says, God forbid that I should ever stop praying for you. So when you pray for someone, you always pray good for them. Amen. You don't pray bad. You pray good. Right. And if you have difficult people, pray for good. And keep hoping. Never give up. Let's pray.